Alright, the wrist routine. I had filmed one on the floor the other day on the mat, and then I started playing with some other exercises today that involved this towel and the pole. You're going to need both of those. And found out a couple of kind of new cool things which I think are going to be quite helpful. I'm just going to warm up here to begin with. You can just copy these. I won't go through technique because there isn't really any. I'm doing this at the table for two reasons. Number one, you don't need to get changed and do it on the floor, so hopefully it's a bit less of a burden in the daily routine. Second up, I was thinking back to when my elbows were really struggling to get straight when I had my bicep tendon injuries and things, and I think what held me back for a long while was the fear of hyperextension when I was doing exercises, and when I started just playing around doing these on the table, I felt like I was able to push a little bit further because I was in control of my body weight. I wasn't on the floor and sort of worried that I was going to fall forward into it or something. So try this on the table, see how it feels. All of these can easily be just put on the floor. You just kneel down and do it on the mat. But I think there is possibly some benefit to doing it on the table. Just rotating, getting blood flowing to begin with. There's a mix of things in here today as well, some stretches, some strength things, lots of things that involve movement. I'll try and point out as many technique points as I can as we go through. The numbers, sets and reps, I'm always doing reps of 10 whenever I'm doing an exercise. There is really no basis for this other than that it takes about the right amount of time and you see some benefit from it. If you want to do more, do more. If you want to do less, do less. If you like some exercises, not others, just stick to the ones you like. Apart from the bar ones, I really do think bar ones are going to be helpful, but they're later on in the routine. At the very end of the routine, there's some strengthening wrist things as well. It can be done anytime. So we talked about wrist push-ups the other day. I'm going to do 10 of these to start with both hands together. I'm doing these with my shoulders well behind my wrists. I'll show you from the other angle. Here we go. Just pushing through, stretching the fingers in the front of the palms. Keeping my elbows as straight as possible while I'm doing this. Same with all of the moves today. We want to keep the elbows as straight as possible. Okay, once we've done 10, we're going to switch to a single arm variation. When we're doing these single arm variations, there's going to be a bit of movement in the shoulder. We're going to basically make a square with the shoulder. So hand goes flat on the table, shoulder in line with the wrist. We're going to lift up as we just did, but now we're going to move the shoulder forward so that it's in line with the fingertips. And then we're going to bring it down and push the wrist into the table. So that's one, up, forwards, down, wrist into the table, keep elbows straight as possible, and back, up, forwards, down with wrist into the table, and back. Throughout this, we want to make sure that your elbow is facing backwards, inside the elbow forwards, not pointing out to the side. Definitely, I find it helpful to have my phone up with the camera flipped around to see myself doing this one. You can see that I've got it rested on the chair in the mirror. Again, I'm going for 10 of these each side. The straighter you can keep your elbow here, the more benefit we're going to get. Up, forwards, down. I'm kind of moving onto my tiptoes as I move forwards there. Again, I'm fairly comfortable putting weight through this. If you're less comfortable putting weight through it, just do it fairly light, get used to the movement, get used to where the pressure is, and then you can start to add a bit more body weight into it after the first week or so. Okay, same thing here, elbow not to the side, pointing forwards. Gonna lift up, wrist push up, extending through, shoulder forwards, wrist back down. That's one. Up, forwards, pushing wrist down and back. Okay, so my shoulder is basically drawing a square and my wrist is just moving up and down. I'm not really putting any weight through when I raise my wrist. Again, I'm just sort of trying to get that Z shape zigzag between the forearm and the fingers. Again, I said 10 of these. If you want to do more, do more. Want to do less, do less. The good thing about wrists being the weak point, or wrists and elbows being the weak point, is that compared to the rest of your body, they hold very little muscle mass, and the muscles that are there are quite small, and we don't work them very often. And this is a good thing we should be able to make progress quickly because they will not be used to being put under stress and they will adapt to these stresses very quickly. So it's a good area to have your weakness because it isn't going to take months to fix. Okay, what I'm doing now, I started in a forward position and put the back of my hand onto the table, and I'm stepping back as far as I can until my wrist just starts to lift a little bit higher, and then I'm just sort of sinking my shoulder and my body weight through the shoulder to push it back into the table. Keeping the elbow face forwards there, see how that not out to the side, forward, stepping back, pushing. Okay, now I'm kind of trying to show this move, so I'm maybe doing it a bit bigger than is necessarily needed, but you can see a step back, push down, step forwards. Again, it's quite important to move your body weight for this one so that we're in control of where the weight is. You can do it all stood in one place, but it's going to mean that you're putting pressure through the elbow that you can't necessarily control. Same thing on the other side, line it up straight, move backwards when the elbow lifts, push it into the floor, step back forwards, pressure off, step backwards, feel the stretch, push it into the table. Step forwards, step back, when the low wrists lift, drop it in. Okay, hopefully you get the idea there. Again, I did 10 of these each side with the back of my hand into the table. Then as you'll see in a minute, I'm going to flip my hand over the opposite way so my palm is down, but my fingers are still facing backwards, and it's essentially the exact same movement, just done the opposite way. Again, try and use your tricep on the back of your arm to pull your shoulder straight, keep your elbow facing forwards as much as you can. Thumb position in this is totally up to you. We talked on the wrist push-ups of having your thumbs retracted, held backwards. It doesn't matter so much on these. For me, on my left wrist, I have a little bit of extra tightness between the base of my thumb and my wrist, so I need a different thumb position on that hand to what I do on my right. It is improving gradually, but just do whatever's comfortable thumb-wise for this one. Okay, so forwards, no pressure, backwards, start to feel it, push the weight through, and stepping off. Stepping back, wrist lifts, pushing it in, and forwards. Stepping back, pushing it in, and forwards. Back, and in, and forwards. Now the reason we're doing so much with these kind of movements here is if we try and hold these positions still, your elbow is not going to necessarily be able to get straight. When we do this with a bit of extra movement, that sudden push can push the elbow into positions that it wouldn't go into on its own, but we're not holding it there long enough for it to start really giving off any kind of painful sensations. So that's why we're doing all of these moving. Once you've done 10 reps, presumably we've spent 15 to 20 seconds down in the longest section of the stretch, so we've still spent some good time down there, time under tension as they say. Stepping forwards, stepping back when the wrists lift, pushing them into the floor. Back, pushing in. Okay. From the shoulder, because our elbow is pointed forwards and upwards, our shoulder is already externally rotated, so we don't need to worry too much about form at the shoulder. Equally, if your elbows are not going straight, obviously if they don't go there yet, that's fine. They're not going to look quite like this. We're still going to get the wrist stretch we want, even if your elbow is bent. We're going to work on the elbow with the bar a little bit later on to tighten up form with that. Okay, just some finger stretching now. So line your shoulder up over the wrist. Straighten your elbow up as much as possible, same form, trying to push the inside of the elbow forwards, point it forwards, just lift each finger, hold it on the end knuckle for about 10 seconds. This stuff feels awesome, your hands will feel super loose afterwards. Just go for the fingers, we can't do thumbs on the table, we'll do thumbs off the table once we've done both hands. shake if it needs it. Opposite side again, lining up the shoulder directly over the wrist, a little bit far back there, hopefully I'll modify it. There we go. Lifting the finger up, holding for 10. If you ever do a bunch of handwriting, this is a nice way to relieve the tension afterwards. These were stretches that I started doing about 3 years ago when I first had to do handwritten school reports for 400 students. An entire month of just writing. Okay, pulling back on the thumb now. If you look closely there, you'll kind of see there's a dark area in the middle of that. Do you know what? I actually don't know what that muscle is called at the base of the thumb. I need to look that up. But you can see there where the stretch is coming. But here's that bit tighter than the rest. We're not trying to touch the thumb to the wrist or anything like that. We're just pulling it backwards and almost pushing your wrist through the stretch. So rather than pulling on the thumb, it's like hold the thumb in front of you and then push the wrist through it. Again, not trying to get the thumb to the forearm. That's for 12-year-olds to do in the playground. Alright, now I come to the bar. These are, quite proud of these. These are my own creation. Tailor-made boutique for you. So I'm wrapping my towel around the stick and I'm going to hold on to the base of the table and I'm going to pull. So you can see that I'm pulling my weight away. This is to take out the kind of the fear of the hyperextension. We can only hyperextend if we're putting pressure through the joint. If we're pulling on it, we're not going to hyperextend. Now I'm just putting that bar on the base of the humerus, just above the elbow, and then using the opposite end to kind of push it forwards and using my stomach as a kind of pivot point to straighten that arm out the whole way. And again, it doesn't look like I'm pulling hard, I'm not pulling hard, but I'm pulling on the table enough that it's taking away that fear reflex of hyperextension. You should feel all of the connective tissue here stretching. It's going to hurt because we're not really stretching the muscles here, we're stretching the connective tissue. Going to be a slightly weird sensation. We're just going to hold it for 30 seconds. Again, when we're in these new areas that we've never stretched before, they are going to be very responsive to the stresses that we're putting on it. So there isn't a need to sort of hold as long as we do with some of our other stretches. You know, hip flex and hamstrings that have been tight and neglected for a long time. Okay, from side on you'll see the same thing here. That towel behind, using my body to pin it in position, just lifting up off the table there and pushing through. Again, you should have complete control here of where your body weight is, so move around wherever feels good and just work on trying to straighten that elbow. Again, if your elbow doesn't hurt, like we were talking about the other day, when you try and straighten it, it's not that it's painful, it's just that it stops. That's a good sign. That just means that it's tight muscles holding it there. Again, if you've had tendonitis as I had previously, your body sort of goes into protection mode by just always keeping the arm ever so slightly bent. And if that's something that you've been doing for more than a year, more than 2 years, maybe more than 5 years, 10 years, maybe even more than that, it's no wonder that they've tightened up. They should loosen up relatively quickly over the next couple of weeks. Okay, if the elbows do hurt a little bit after that, just get some blood flow to move them around, do some rotations, whatever you want. Okay, this is the last stretch. So using the same bar and towel, this time just put the towel a little bit longer. We're going to do both arms together now. This one you will want to ease in a little bit. So I'm just resting it on my stomach. Again, same position, both elbows just above them. Hands down flat on the table, making sure my elbows are pointing forwards, and then I'm stepping up onto my toes to put my weight through. So now my shoulders are in front of my fingertips, and I'm just using my body weight to try and push the elbows through as much as possible. I'll show you from side on as well in a moment. Okay, I did these in sort of 3 10-second bursts again because we are putting weight through the joints now. No point holding it for quite as long if you're not comfortable to, so rather than doing the 30 seconds all in one, just break it up into 3 10s and really concentrate on form and trying to push the elbows through. Same again here. Fingers forward, elbows pointing forwards. Now you'll see that my body goes up onto the toes and then forwards. I'm not off the floor, I'm nowhere near off the floor. I'm just on my toes and pushing forward. You can also just about see here, I was sort of doing these small retractions and protractions with my shoulders, moving them forwards, moving them back, particularly at the back end of the position. That would automatically push my belly out a little bit, which added a little bit more pressure to the bar on the back of the elbows there. Again, these are kind of new ones for me today, but I'm going to start doing these because actually they were awesome. Okay, now these last ones are totally optional. They definitely don't need to be done at the end of every time you do this, and they don't even really need to be done at the end of a routine. There's no warming up to do, but these are just sort of strengthening exercises for the forearm. And even if you're just sat at your desk contemplating sermons for half an hour, just stick in 10 of these on each arm and you'll start to strengthen up the muscles on the forearm, which will help us stretch the other side. We want to stretch the agonist, strengthen the antagonist in both sets. I'm doing this beginning just with my elbow and wrist on the table. I'm going to show you 3 different positions basically. Again, you can do any or all of these. The stretching is more important than the strengthening. Sunk down now, shoulder flat. 10 seconds again. When you are doing these, I forgot about this, Kingsley's going to make an appearance. When you are doing these, if your fingers start to curl forwards, kind of clawing, then pull them up and then just try and push your knuckles through and really focus on straightening the fingers at the end of the move there. We want to get this stretch all the way from the elbow to the fingertips. As with all of these, I'm doing these in sets of 10. There we go, opposite side. This is where Kingsley's going to pop up and say hello for a little bit. Wants to sit at the table with the big boys. Opposite side, again just pulling through, getting that kind of squeeze, muscular tension in the forearm. This is one of those really dissatisfying movements because you're like, my wrist doesn't move very far, and it takes a lot of energy and power just to move it a tiny little distance. But I've done these about 3 times this week because I've been working on these wrist movements and trying to work out which ones are best and how to do them. And actually I reckon I've probably added at least 15 degrees of flexion to this hand already. My hand probably stopped about there, I think, on Monday. So again, quite quick progress being made, and I imagine you'll probably see the same. Okay, shoulder down to the table now. Okay, you see there where my fingers sort of clawed on the way up, then push the knuckles forwards and straighten out. Okay, I'm basically going to just go through exactly the same ones on this side, and that was where I called it a day. The most important ones are probably the ones with the bar for the elbow. The wrist will just gradually warm up with any of the small exercises. You don't have to do them all in that order. In terms of frequency, I'd say if you can aim to do this 3 times a week, you'll see progress pretty quickly. Twice a week, you'll still see progress. If you want to do it every day, that's great. It might start to hurt after a couple of days just because these areas aren't really used to working. So, don't overdo it straight away. But yeah, hopefully that's nice enough to get going with.